and adoption of new aviation systems. The programme itself is complemented with industry investment as well, and as it heads into phase 3, the aim is to deliver a consolidated, ambitious approach, but delivering real business solutions. As the future flight operates in low-level airspace, this creates a new airspace and adding a new multimodal dimension requiring new operational frameworks and partnerships between organisations and expertise not traditionally associated with aviation. So the success of the Future Flight Challenge and implementation of the new aviation technologies and services is reliant on a suite of factors, but a key enabler is the local authorities. So the local authorities must meet the needs and ensure the safety of the community they serve, and a balance needs to be made to ensure that the services they implement are fit for purpose and are economically viable as well. So what are the considerations when making those decisions, and what are the barriers to implementing novel transport solutions into regions? So I'm pleased to have on the panel a combination of local authorities and experts in the implementation of low-level airspace operations. We'll try and unpack all of those elements in a bit more detail. But ultimately, let's try to end the session on a bit of a positive note and identify the solutions and areas we need to work on as a future flight community. And that will ensure the success of the programme, but ultimately the provision of these new technologies and transport solutions to deliver those efficiencies and change people's lives that we aim to achieve. So joining me today is Sunil Bedan, who's the Transport Innovation Manager at Coventry City Council. So Sunil has 35 years experience in traffic, transport and ITS industry. He joined Coventry City Council in 2010 as a UTMC manager and is responsible for the UTMC Highway Network Development Team and managing the response and monitoring of services. But also excitingly, Coventry is currently developing the proof of concept for the world's first vertiport. And George Fortinas is UAV analyst at Oxfordshire County Council's Innovation Hub. And George joined the council in 2018, and he works on autonomous vehicles projects and has since been involved in numerous data-driven policy interventions and trials. With us also is Emily Bratt, who's innovation lead at Drone Prep, and Emily has a background in uncrewed aerial vehicles from the University of Worcester, and where she has explored their use for surveying and joined Drone Prep about a year ago. But within this time, she's been at the forefront of ample pioneering projects. And that includes the Royal Mail's first ever delivery by drone to a remote lighthouse on the Isle of Mull and connecting the mainland of the Isle of Scilly by drone with Royal Mail and NHS. So she's in the tag team today with Gareth Watmore, who is the CEO and co-founder of Drone Prep. And Gareth specialises in development planning, sustainable transport, drones and new mobility, whilst previously working for planning, engineering and multidisciplinary consultancy firms and startups over the last 13 years. So Gareth set up Drone Prep in 2019 with the aim of opening up low-level airspace for drone use and helping connect landowners, pilots and enterprises and end users to help the drone sector flourish. So welcome everybody to the panel today. And just a reminder, if you've got any questions yourselves for the panelists, please put them into the chat function and I'll ask them on your behalf. So Emily, shall we start with you? And I was just wondering, so you've worked, as I said in the introduction, on many projects, including the one with Royal Mail and NHS, and you work with a variety of landowners and local authorities as well. How do you think that, from your perspective, how can local authorities make the most of the opportunities that drone technologies can provide?
I feel like I always say this word and people are going to kill me for saying it, but I think they just need to start getting engaged. Like so many are. So for example, we work with Bristol quite a lot, and we're working up in Angus with the Agril and Bute Agril and Bute councils up in Scotland as well. And just seeing their engagement, and I feel like often local authorities have kind of been siloed because there's a stringent set of rules that they have to follow and they've got their usual routines. But from opening them up to this world of drones, they've learned, look, this is what we can achieve, and implementing it into our day-to-day activities. They're kind of learning how much more they can evolve in that kind of space. So I think just that word engagement, learning, taking the opportunities, when people reach out to them, just talking with them, even if it's just over a quick cup of coffee, the things that can spiral out of those opportunities, just take it with them. Everyone's on the learning curve. The drone sector's only just starting to evolve. We're all learning together. So as much as we can learn from them, they can learn from us. It's just doing it together.
Have you got an example that you can draw on that in terms of those learnings and the experience that's enabled you to accelerate that collaboration?
So for example, it's just kicking off at the moment is the Montrose drone port, and just learning from them, speaking to the Angus Council, the use cases that I didn't even know they'd have and they didn't know could be applied to drones. So for example, like flooding, how they could use that sort of materials and use drones for that. They're just all learning together. I think that's what we've kind of learned. Just, I don't want to say too much because get a slap on the wrist, but yeah.
I think it's important to add that at the moment, a lot of the sectors that we work in, the aviation sectors, are quite siloed. We've got some really talented people that work in aviation, but there isn't necessarily a strategic knowledge of how the very specialist knowledge in aviation and drone tech can apply to lots of different end users and lots of different local authority arenas. And local authorities are responsible for all sorts of different public services, and they've got to work really hard on maintaining that, and there's often only a small area of the local authority committed to innovation. But I think the key journey we've been on with some really inspiring local authorities, including Angus, is when they've been able to source funding, you know, like Future Flight, or in Angus's situation, the Tay Cities deal, where they go, hey, actually there's a real opportunity here to grow the economy locally and serve jobs locally, and grow with the drone industry. And actually it's a knowledge transfer thing at this point, because we're telling them all the exciting things that are possible with drones, but also what the barriers are, because we can't achieve everything yet. That's why we need R&D. And the local authorities are telling us, well, these are the pain points that we have within the local authority. Where is the connection between both, and how can we work together to solve the problems that local authorities have with this new technology? And I think that's the good example from both Angus, and we can draw on other examples later in the session in Cornwall potentially as well.
That's great, thank you. So it's understanding pain points and being open about what those pain points are. Then you can have a sort of, I guess, a productive conversation in terms of finding those solutions, and that's best going to serve the community. And leveraging, as you say, things like Future Flight, which is good, which I guess that will bring me on to Sunil, if I can. So, you know, you've got a very ambitious and exciting project in development here through Future Flight with this FOAC vertiport. So why is it important for Coventry to be involved in this Future Flight programme then, in your perspective?
Thank you, Phil. Like I said, I just want to take it slightly back with Emily and Garrett's point that it's the engagement. And I think the reason Coventry are sort of getting involved in it, we've been involved in quite a lot of innovation projects like autonomous vehicles and those sort of technologies. And quite rightly, as Emily's pointed out, these are emerging technologies. Drones isn't the sort of, you know, that's already happening. People are using drones. There is a lot of, as you say, in Angus, you're using them. They've already been used for delivering parcels and things like that. Where the local authorities are concerned, Phil, is we haven't got an infrastructure or the understanding. Local authorities don't have the knowledge of what the flight legislations, what are the requirements for the drones to operate at low levels. And those are the reasons where we, you know, Coventry feel that they are in a better placed position, because we seem to be leading the way in understanding technology that's future-proof. So, for example, how do you operate a drone? Like I said, there are legislations that you have to meet. You need some sort of an infrastructure to try and build, or you've got to have somewhere where their drones can land or take off and can operate within an urban environment. Because local authorities up until now, when you talk about transport, quite happy to work on roads, rails, buses, taxis, because that's what we have knowledge of over the years. We've worked very, very tirelessly in making sure that, e-bikes, e-scooters, anything that's on the road, we're quite happy to work with, and we'll be able to manage in that. How do we operate drones is a totally new field, and this is why we feel Coventry is leading that development, because the infrastructure has got to change, the legislations have got to change. You now have to engage with aviation authorities rather than just the transport authorities. How can we connect the rail into the urban environment? Because operating drones in remote parts isn't a problem, because you can fly them anywhere, you can land them anywhere where there isn't any infrastructure. But to make it useful to operate within an urban environment, you need some sort of an infrastructure. So, if you're catching a train, you have to go to a train station, and you have an origin, you have a destination. Where drones don't have that infrastructure at the moment, and that's why we feel Coventry, as a lead authority, who are very, very sort of forward thinking in how we can look at implementing future transport, because this is something we feel was the missing link in when we talk about mobility as a service. We've never we speak about flying, so flying aeroplanes, fine, we've mastered that. This is talking about low level flying in an urban environment. So that's why we feel that we're in the right position at the right time to make sure that our infrastructure is ready and Coventry is ready for that future flight.
Yeah, so some challenges that you've picked out now around the legislation side of things, and collaboration being absolutely key to this. And I guess that's how Future Flight Programme can help and enable that. And you've got a good sort of set of partnerships working with you to deliver on this project. And then the infrastructure side, the digital and physical infrastructure side is a real challenge. So how do you see, from your council perspective, how are these new technologies and these transport modes that you're working on benefit the user and passengers? I mean, how do you see this urban vertiport benefiting your users?
Again, if what you see behind me is a mock-up of an urban airport. Now, this particular airport, when you look at it as a storytell or as a deliverable project, this is in an urban environment. You have an infrastructure that will allow for drones to be landing and taking off in a vertical position in an urban environment. When you look at how it integrates with the rest of the transport mode, if it's next to a railway station, your journey to the railway station from a housing development that has just been built, which has a vertiport, so rather than having to use a taxi or a bus or some sort of other transport, you can physically take a drone to the urban airport next to the train station, and then you can travel by train, or the drone can take you to an airport where you can fly. So or you can have, in the pandemic has just taught us how many additional vehicles have gone on the road delivering every day parcels, because people have now got used to having parcels delivered through the pandemic. That's increased our traffic flows, that's increased pollution. Once you have this infrastructure in place, what you're now looking at is people being able to deliver parcels to a central hub, then they can be distributed locally. You could have parcels delivered by train to the urban airport, or a structure or an infrastructure within an urban environment, and can be distributed locally. We're using a more sustainable modes of transport, which are zero emissions, like e-scooters, e-bikes, cargo bikes, which doesn't have that pollution effect, and it reduces that congestion. So it's that bigger picture that you start looking for, that once you have that infrastructure, you'll be able to improve your air qualities, you'll be able to improve that transport mode, and you'll be able to make that journey, the last mile journey, or a slightly longer, much more accessible.
Okay. And have you, as just as part of that, that public perception piece, how is this project being embraced by the community?
and that's part and parcel of our project currently, Michelle. That's what the project's about, because public perception is when we just using it as an example, when we were the first city to have autonomous vehicles driving around on the streets of Coventry, and the public perception before we did the demonstration was, oh no, you can't have cars that will kill people. And that engagement, once they saw the practical example of how it can operate with a safety driver, and he was able to navigate around, people will then more acceptance of that new technology. This is something that has never ever hit anyone's radar. People see drones, the police use them for surveillances. Like I say, other utility companies use them for surveillances, but they are for that specific reason. What we now saying is this is going to be the integration. So we've got to demonstrate to the public how can we actually make it better for you. This is going to be the future, and it's that buy-in from the public. So once they see the infrastructure and once they see the demonstrations happening, and that's what our public perception part of the project is, to show that. They're also the part of trying to assist, and this is where the Future Fly program comes in. It's to what legislations do we need? What is, because it's like building super highways in sky now. We've built highways on surface, but this is talking about, because you will have a flight path. You can only fly in a certain area. You can only fly at a certain height. Local authorities aren't aware of this. This is new to them. So Coventry City Council is taking the lead on that to try and make sure that we support other local authorities to see that this is where you've got to start thinking outside the box, basically.
Great, that's really good. Thank you, Sunil. George, I'll just come to you, if that's okay. I just want to pick up on the Innovation Hub that you've got. Can you explain how the hub operates and enable the implementation of your new transport solutions, or enables you to partner, essentially? Go on, happy to you.
So practically, as a county council, it would be good to give an introduction on who we are, and we're not just a transport and highways authority. We're also public health, consumer protection, education, emergency planning service. So we have a more overarching, holistic view of the ins and outs of the county. We are an externally funded part of the council, which gives us a bit more remit to work with industry and academia and new disruptive technologies. We understand that not only are the number of disruptions increasing, but also the rate of adoption as well. And that's not how, in the traditional sense, we could make a 10-year strategy. We found that the way we tried to predict the future would not be adequate moving forward. This came from close collaboration with academia, with the University of Oxford, with Brooks, and industry such as Oxbotica, 5AI, and others. So we have a number of innovators in the area, and in order to scale up the technologies, we needed a real-world testing and real-world feedback. It's one thing to test in a lab, and it's definitely the first steps, but we need to understand that it's not representative of the real world. And B, to see what the critical next steps are, both in terms of safety and improving the concept, whether it is as an enabler for the trial or as a potential client for roadside infrastructure, as a partner in the communications and risk management, or as a policy authority for long-term planning and needs. We believe that we have a lot to bring to the table, and we have expertise in this by dealing with different technologies over the years. For instance, in connected autonomous vehicles, with the work of George Economides, which has become well known in the scene in regards to how local authorities deal with these technologies. And also Ruth Anderson with upgrading and updating UTMC to account for changes due to these disruptions. We have a very team that looks at every area, whereas a local authority we can innovate. From health and social care, EVs, UAVs, connected autonomous vehicles. And we are happy to support even from the concept stage, as we did with Auto Drone, by bringing together the data expertise and the understanding the needs of the county, while in Dromedas and Aishimano, we are there side by side. And in our Horizon-funded project Harmony, we are using our transport models to be informed from the behavioral models of the drones and how they change.
That's great, thank you. So it enables you is to work with partners and from a concept stage. I just wanted to draw that out, and I guess people can just come to you directly with their ideas if they wanted to. Is that
they can.
How they can engage with you? Okay, that's great. So what are the main drivers for you when you're deciding which projects to partner on? You know, is it a specific use case? Or, you know, how do you make a decision about what's going to excite you or be useful for the community you serve then?
We have a vision. Huh?
George.
Okay, yeah, I heard something in the background. Anyway, we have a vision of enabling technologies and growth, and that's what helps us. For connectivity, when talking about drones, we need to understand a lot from connectivity standpoint. We have taken part in iShimano, which is a future of flight funded project. With our involvement in this project, we wanted to know what the critical infrastructure needs were, either it being LiDAR or road-based monitoring systems. And this is where we cross into our EU project, which is Harmony, which looks at the strategic and transport modeling aspect of drones. What are the long-term implications of new mobility to the network? How will urban air mobility and freight change? What is possible, and what is the best fit for it? We make this decision based on both the value to us as a local authority and the knowledge we will gain from dealing with disruptive technologies, from the legislation standpoint to the real world implications. The time is now, and that's why we strive to stay ahead of the curve in every new and disruptive technology.
Okay. Sunil, do you want to add to that? I mean, what are the drivers, I guess, for you as a council?
It is, and quite rightly, as George says, that, you know, these are emerging technologies. These are technologies that, you know, we're introducing to a younger generation who will be taking this up, you know, and to make those changes and to introduce that, it's like, so we've got 5G rolling out. How do we integrate with that? We've got we're working with European Space Agency. You know, where do we have that communication side? Because these are the infrastructure changes that are needed to make sure that, you know, those future flights are able to operate safely, firstly, you know, and they're able to operate globally, rather than, because setting those standards, someone's got to be able to take the lead on trying to set those standards, because we've got to have a common standard. You can't have 5, 6 different standards within a country to operate these. So working in collaboration with the likes of Oxford, and which we do quite a lot, you know, when we're doing connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, that will help other authorities, and it will help the government to understand what standards are required to have a safe operational mode of these new emerging transports.
Okay. Right, thank you. So just throw this out to anybody if you want to pick it up. So what do we think are the barriers then? Let's start with that in terms of implementing low airspace innovations. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, we can jump in there. Gosh, barriers. So I mean, look, we're all on this huge innovation journey with drones at the moment, and I mean, we can almost sort of start with the public perception piece. So when it comes to drones and any type of new air vehicle, I mean, especially drones, I mean, the public perception in the UK is the technology has been around for 20 years or more in the military. And we started off using drones to kill people, and that's not the best place to start a public perception journey. And then beyond that, when consumer drones come out, then the biggest news story before COVID-19 and the drone projects that, you know, some of the future flight participants have been on has been the fiasco at Gatwick, and everyone's holiday being disrupted by drones. And that's the worst place to start when we come to trying to win hearts and minds about the stuff that we're doing. COVID-19 has been absolutely awful for everyone, but if there's one nugget of positivity for our particular sector, is it's been one of those moments in time where everyone's paused and rethought the art of the possible, and some really talented people have got together and designed some really cool projects to help with the COVID response. One of those, I think, was the project we were involved with, and the project we led on the Isles of Scilly, where we managed to harness the wonderful funding of the Future Flight Phase 1.5/2, which I will reframe it. I can't remember the official terminology now, Michelle. But we had some funding there from UKRI, which was really enabling. And we managed to connect the mainland in Cornwall with the Isles of Scilly, which is 27 miles offshore. And we brought in two of the best in the land doing drone delivery, both with very different capabilities. And the great thing about that is then you get to challenge some of these things for the first time. So we worked really closely with the Civil Aviation Authority within our partnership to accelerate that use case. We even had minister backing at one stage as well to help things move forward. And the other key thing with this, to break down new barriers is the momentum. So we, again, without being siloed, we went out and we spoke to about everyone to try and get involved in this project, including Royal Mail and the NHS and biotech companies and pharmacy companies. And sometimes having the amount of different diversity of partners on a project can break down some of the barriers to start off with. But in terms of barriers overall, low-level airspace is really complex. Historically, aviation, the jet age is based on aircraft flying from airports to airports, transiting low-level airspace very briefly, and then operating in high-level airspace away from where people are and where people are worried about it. And then, of course, because we've seen these aircraft ever since the 1930s, we see an aircraft, we're very used to it being there, we don't feel threatened by it, the safety case works perfectly. Drones and eVTOLs is very different. The use case we're proposing there is they could take off from practically anywhere, transit in low-level airspace, and land anywhere to serve lots of different new things. And historically, there's so many interactions from wildlife, environmental protection designated areas. You've got airspace rights, especially in urban areas. You've got developers that have got airspace rights on skyscrapers. And then you've got the privacy of individuals. There's so many different things there that need to be unpacked. And I think those are some of the barriers, and the best way to pursue it, and it's lovely to hear from Sunil and George on their projects as well, is to actually engage and talk to people about these issues before rolling out the steamroller and doing it. So I really commend Sunil in his project at Coventry, really amazing ambition, which will be realised in some years' time. But to start that process, it's about talking to people on the ground, winning hearts and minds, figuring out the nuances of how those different modes of transport connect with each other and serve those use cases. So I think the thing we often say here is we take baby steps together. So we find places where we can exploit quickly, and for us to start off with the real world use cases today, those tend to be rural areas, but we can take those lessons and transplant those into the urban context to accelerate the more ambitious and potentially more useful projects that could materialize in 4 to 5 years' time.
And I think just on that, I think an important thing is to speak before you do, so you can't just force the technology on people. And I didn't quite realise this until I spoke to my parents after our first Royal Mail delivery. My mum was going, I don't want drone deliveries in my back garden. They're going to see me when I'm like sunbathing. And I'm like, Mum, it's not happening now. Calm down. I think once you just speak to them and say like, look, it's not invading your privacy. It's not like the hobbyist drones. It's not going to steal your parcels with another drone. You just need to talk to them, and they realise, and it breaks down those barriers. And the same was with the commercial entities. So from example, Royal Mail, when I went into the delivery office, I had so many posties come up to me like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my job. And I just want to say, no, drones here aren't to replace anything. There's so many existing frameworks that work. The boats work, the planes work. The drones can just be there to supplement what doesn't work. So for example, like Gareth said on the Isle of Scilly, the boat and the plane, some 45% of the days of the year, it couldn't run because of fog, mist, bad conditions. So why can't the drone be used to help the Royal Mail postie get the post on time, to then do their rounds? They don't get in trouble by their bosses for not delivering. It's just speaking to them and listening to their concerns to then move on altogether. I don't think anybody should be forced into anything.
Yeah, perfect. And just very briefly, Michelle, if I'm able, the project we've got up in Mull at the moment, so everyone saw the big headline of the first delivery back in last December. That got 111 million clicks on the first day after release, so the world knows about it. But ever since then, we've not flown again. We've been talking to everyone on the island. So with the partnership with Royal Mail, we actually interview all 3,300 residents and businesses on the island to both find out both their fears, but also the opportunities about drones. And then once we've harvested that information, we can design something in consultation that works for the people of Mull, but also for the different end users. And the scope of that project continues to get larger and larger with the more things that we find out. So it's a really exciting way to go about it. The end game is, you know, permanent commercial ops if they're commercially viable, and that's what we're working towards. But the key point is talk to people first, listen to their opinions, design, you know, the future of innovation, the future of flight around their particular needs, and overcome some of the concerns that they have about the technology.
Yeah, so I was going to expand on with you, Gareth, about the public perception piece and that privacy element that you just talk about, and the airspace rights issues. How can you work with local authorities, or others work with local authorities to enable the adoption of these drone and eVTOL technologies then, in that respect, based on your learnings? And
yeah, so there's lots of different ways. So again, the quick context is it's a new area. So, you know, the ANO, the Air Navigation Order, Civil Aviation Authority, you know, they have a jurisdiction over airspace, but actually some of these use cases we're talking about also interact with all sorts of other legal connotations. So bylaws, environmental law, privacy law, there's a lot more, I won't reel them all off, but everyone, whenever a law exists, there are two sides to the coin, and there's legitimate arguments on both sides. And I think everyone hates things getting bogged down in law. So I think the best thing is to create these scenarios which can be win-win, where both of the people that could be on counter sides of an argument find a joint opportunity to proceed together, and therefore there's no conflict. And the good thing about how things have proceeded so far is there are some local authorities, and there's two on the call already, that have spotted that opportunity. And you know, they're going about things in the correct way, so you can engage and realise those opportunities. On top of that, you know, we've experienced of, you know, on the smaller scale, Bristol is a really good example, because their use case isn't about building a massive drone port. It's simply trying to deconflict an existing issue with road flight, but also helping their opportunity in terms of revenue diversification when it comes to film locations. So on our platform, which maps out 56 million land parcels in the UK, we've found Bristol Council new film locations to help the creative arts industry create some amazing content for films and Poldark and Doctor Who and all this sort of stuff. And we've basically used locations in Bristol, which they hadn't previously realised you could fly from a drone, with the necessary risk assessments in place. And you know, every time they have a flight, there is a revenue opportunity from those film companies. But likewise, you know, we can also define places for hobbyist flight as well. The council's got some huge land parcels which you can de-risk from a hobbyist perspective. And again, if you offer that opportunity for the over 262,000 hobbyists that exist in the UK now, you're less likely to have those hobbyists flying in places within the city which are going to conflict and break the law in other areas. So it's giving to all the different parts of the drone community to ensure that they can all share airspace in a reasonable and responsible fashion.
Very good. Yeah, very good. I like that example. Thank you. So going back to the barriers, so we talked about public perception and the complex nature of the system, and there's a whole variety, a whole suite of issues that we need to think about, like environment and airspace rights and privacy. Is there anything, Sunil or George, that you want to add to on that?
And yeah, just to add on to what Gareth just said, that, you know, it's that perception. The biggest barrier is public perception in what we've seen so far, because it's something that the public haven't seen, the public haven't understood. And it's quite rightly, as Emily said, that, you know, I'm not having drones entering my private garden. You know, I could have anyone, it could drop. That perception, that demonstration, and it's demonstrating that this is going to be done in a constructive way, and it's going to be in a legislative way, and it's going to be in a safe environment. You will not have drones flying like ants everywhere in the city. It will be a dedicated route, a dedicated flight path, and it will be in consultation with the aviation authority. And I think there's a question in the box to say what kind of mechanism for local authorities and national aviation authorities to cooperate. This is where, up until now, when local authorities deal with transportation, have only dealt with transportation, as I said earlier, on ground level. Aviation has been at an arm's length because it doesn't need to be integrated. All of a sudden now, the local authorities have to engage with the aviation authority to understand what the flight paths are. What are the legislation for flight paths? What are the safe zones? What is the distance you have to have as a safe path? How all of these questions, they're the barriers. They're an unknown barrier because local authorities haven't dealt with that before. It was like I said earlier on, since the 30s we've been flying aircrafts, and those legislations are in place and it's safe to fly now. This is something new. So those barriers can be easily addressed once you've got that public engagement. Academias like Oxford, Cambridge, Coventry University, who are engaged with us, they can create those simulations. They can show people and do a virtual flight with them to say, this is what the flight's going to look like. This is how it's going to be addressed. And that engagement and that public perception can be changed gradually. And quite likely, it's got to be baby steps first, because the moment you introduce something and force it down someone's throat, it will be rejected and it fails. So this way, you bring them on board in trying to understand what that technology is going to benefit, and it's always a benefit that outweighs the issues about not being able to operate, because it's like you say, beneficially, it will give them those opportunities to understand how it can help them in their daily lives.
So George, is there any of that you agree with, or you want to add? Or
yes, unlike autonomous vehicles, we do not have a safety driver on board, and unlike traditional aviation, we do not have a set-off and landing location. There's also other implications, such as noise pollution, active travel risk, and all the way to who is the authority between buildings, parks, events, and public health in the case, and how can we take all that and move forward? That's what I want to bring forward.
Yeah. Okay. So, in light of what you just said, Sunil, what are the considerations for your urban vertiport then around that?
Again, the major considerations are that buy-in. When you see a structure like that in the middle of a town, people are going to wonder what's it going to do. Is it going to be overlooking my back garden? Is it going to be is it going to be interfering something? What are the safety implications? All of those sort of perceptions and all of those questions have to be answered. So once you see a structure in place, then people can actually come and visit, and you'll be, at this particular project that we're working on, it's not about drones, because like Gareth and Emily have said, those flying drones it's a proven technology. It's there. It's the development of passenger carrying drones, and the technology of drones isn't an issue. It's the infrastructure that's needed for those drones to operate in a safe environment. That's where we're coming from, and that's where I think is what is needed for local authorities to understand. Once we've got a structure to demonstrate to the public, and to allow them to do that simulation flying and experience what it looks like, that I think will gradually change public perception.
Okay.
I'm able to jump in here, Michelle. I'm interested in talking about actually the urban context as well at the moment. So obviously the big ambition at Coventry is to have the first vertiport, and it looks fantastic. The designs are amazing. You've got Hyundai on board. It's looking fantastic. At the moment, the Civil Aviation Authority they struggle with permissions for cargo drones. Actually, we've got to choose really select places within the United Kingdom where that's possible. We've got to submit them under something called a temporary danger area to do so, which segregates airspace, and they are temporary in nature. There's a bit of work that needs to be done amongst people on the Future Flight 3 call to move that agenda forward in partnership with the CAA, so we can enable some of the urban use cases in the future. So I think there should be a real focus on that within the people on this call and the opportunity that exists. And then beyond that, I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of people from local authorities on the call today that don't know anything about drones or eVTOLs or the Future Flight Challenge for that matter. And I think it's worth outlining that there's just a huge opportunity here for local authorities that want to engage. There is a funding vehicle through Future Flight. And you know, there's an opportunity really to brainstorm how you know, the local authority can deliver their services more flexibly and more agile with the use of drones as well in a way that they've not yet considered.
And I think the way forward for all of that is for everyone to do it together. So I know almost with drones and like how with the jet age, everyone wanted to be the first to do something. I think if everyone can share their ideas and share their lessons learned, no, the technology in the sector isn't going to move forward unless we all do it together. So if, say, I had a learning that I could pass on to another local authority to make them develop, that will ultimately help us to develop, because it's that public perception piece. It's not just one person spearheading it, it's us all doing it together.
And the best way of looking at it is the big picture of how does it look to those that aren't part of the sector that might want to use these services in the future. If we all collaborate at this early stage and work on these fantastic projects, we can do some amazing things. And I suppose the quick example is on the Isles of Scilly. You know, we didn't just have the one drone company that we were funded to use. We brought in another one, and we brought in some medical end users and the NHS and Royal Mail, and together that makes that project a lot more special. It means we've achieved things all together, which we wouldn't have dreamt of at the start. And you know, I see the same sort of vision for the types of projects that Sunil and George are talking about here. If we sort of, you know, do proof of concept maybe in rural areas where that's possible at the moment under the current regulatory framework, but we design those projects in a way that can begin to answer the questions that are needed for more complex projects, then that joined up thinking is going to serve us all. And the last point I think for local authorities is, you know, if you do get these projects and do get this funding, and you do have a sandbox environment locally within your local authority to test out this type of technology, then it sends a really big marker out to anyone internationally that's working with drone tech and that is well funded privately or publicly or whatever measure to come and exploit that technology here in the United Kingdom and in particular local authority regions. And those that move quickest, like Coventry and like Oxfordshire, but also Angus and Cornwall and Worcestershire, where we're based here at Malvern, all of those local authorities are already leading the charge. But I suppose for any other local authorities that are listening in, there's a big fund here, and that there are others available as well, but the technology is now viable. We're not at the stage anymore where we're laughing about the capability because we don't think it's going to happen. I think it's really accelerated, and it's just a huge opportunity for everyone.
And it's an opportunity we don't want to be wasted as well. We don't want what happened with the e-scooter whole scenario, where it was this amazing scenario where everyone was really excited to be driving around everywhere, and then all of a sudden they're now illegal in X, Y, and Z places. We don't want that to happen with drones because their capability is so strong.
And I quite agree with both of you, Emily and Gareth. And sorry, Michelle, just wanted to come in there because I think as we were talking about barriers, and if for those who are listening in, local authorities wise, what we found is two people or some key members within your organisation need to be on board with this. You know, the higher management and your politicians, convince them of what the futures are going to look like, because they're the ones who will support you, and they're the ones who will actually make sure that public engagement, because they're the people who talk to the public more than what we do as local officers. We don't. These are the people who go out and get the votes, and if they can actually understand what you are trying to deliver and they get the concept of it, then half your job is done. But quite rightly, as you said, that, you know, it's better that it's delivered as a global thing rather than an individual thing, because having that collaboration, one of the biggest advantages I've found through the projects that we've been doing is when you're working in that collaboration, you're able to actually enhance that delivery a lot sooner, because you're learning from each other and you're not repeating or not making the same mistakes as other people have made that. So, you know, we're quite happy to share our knowledge and experience with everyone else to break those barriers down.
Yes, it sounds like it's obviously a collective activity that needs to happen, and so we can coalesce and all these activities and positive use cases, and hopefully with the Future Flight programme we can do that, and we are starting to do that, and seeing these really good use cases coming through and really positive stories that can help with that public perception piece as well. But also from a high level on the government perspective, I think the program's being received quite positively. It's communicated positively. So and the value that certainly the COVID projects that were around, the drone COVID projects, there's some absolutely fantastic activities around that and the impact that those projects have made. So I guess, Emily, drawing on that is, how can local authorities make the steps then in that case to enable them to prepare them to collaborate on projects? Well, I'm just thinking about, as a collective, we know we need to work together. What are the actions? I want to get to a point within the next few minutes before we end this session in terms of, okay, let's identify these key steps to enable us to move forward. So we've got some good stuff already around working together and sharing our ideas. Is there anything else that you think you could add to it?
I think the whole point around sharing ideas is really strong, because I think, how can we establish all the next steps without talking to everyone? So like we said on the previous Future Flight calls, this idea of a round table, I know we've got Sunil, George and ourselves, but if we can get everyone all sat in one place together and go, I don't know anything about drones, this is what I want, and then maybe Sunil could come and say, well, we've achieved that here, what could you bring to your project that's different to mine? I think it's about using these little ideas of test beds. So for example, if one company is testing one thing, another company should test another thing in a different area. So I like this, almost bringing the CAA sandbox into more of a reality is what I'd say to do. That's how I think a good next step would be. I don't know if you've got anything to add on to that.
No, I think that's good. I mean, ultimately, local authorities, to realise the opportunity of the Future Flight Challenge and the technology, they need to have a little think about their low-level interactions, so low-level airspace interactions, actually, and what is their policy for flight at the moment? Are they completely, blocking all this stuff because it's too difficult to navigate, and there are other things to consider that are more important, in which case, fine. But, explain that to everyone so they know, where we stand, so we know where the pathways of opportunity are, because the local authority thing is interesting because, when you're mapping out logistics, you often look at the whole UK. You don't just look at local authorities in isolation. So, Oxfordshire, for example, Oxfordshire is going to be even better at what they do if they've also got Wiltshire and the other neighbouring counties of Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire, Warwickshire, all of those guys having a similar attitude, because it's linking places together. It's also part of the levelling up strategy as well, if you look elsewhere in the UK. So Cornwall will need a good relationship with Devon and Somerset and dare I say Bristol in order to realise the challenge completely. So it's getting those different local authorities to collaborate and share the vision as well for those bigger strategic opportunities that exist, which are beyond the borders of any individual local authority.
And I think listening to what the end user wants, so for example, Coventry have got Hyundai, we had Royal Mail, and I learned so much just from speaking to the staff, even low down to high up at Royal Mail, and learning what they want to get out in 1 year, what they want to get out in 5 years, because that's how you create your roadmap going forward. If the end users aren't ready in the next year to do full-scale commercial operations, what's the point in us testing all of this? Why can't we do more relative safety case examples to get the CAA on board to then take it to the end users when they're ready? It's just looking at that bigger perspective and not thinking we're all on the same page, when at the moment in this new technology we're not.
So going back to that messaging piece, George, and picking up what Gareth said about the neighbouring counties and things like that, are you finding that through your sort of discussions with your colleagues in neighbouring counties? Are you able to communicate what you're doing and perhaps share best practice and inspire?
It's difficult sometimes to have this conversation because it's very early days, and I think that one potential solution would be to create a collective of industry, academia, and local authorities to look at what is best practice and how industry and academia can help local authorities deal with these applications and what are the implications. So for us, we have lots of talks with them within the EEH about this, but it's still early days for us.
Great. Well, let's move on.
I was just to come in with the points Gareth and Emily have made. The other people we forget who are very important is the emergency services. What this particular technology and this particular mode of transport will do is will enhance how the emergency services are delivered. For example, we spoke about NHS, but don't forget you've got the fire, the police, and the ambulance service to deliver some of those key components or the key medical supplies, especially in these areas that they can't be delivered. This technology is absolutely going to be. West Midlands Police are engaging with us because they can see the benefits on those, and it's just an absolute. They're passionate about it so much so that they want to engage because they see the benefits in improving the social care for people they are looking after. So that's another angle that we need to engage with. There's a couple of questions, Emily. So Michelle, do you want me to take them on there, which are in the question and answers, or shall I leave it to
I was just going to pick that up, if I may, Sunil. So I'm not sure who this one's targeted at, but regarding urban mobility passenger aircraft, so an aircraft will fly from A to B and then need to recharge for 30-60 minutes. And in that time, it holds up that one landing takeoff pad. How will that be solved?
It's solved within this design because we've got a hangar built into the design. So you have a hangar when the platform comes down. If it needs a charge, there will be like you would at an airport. The drone will drop down, pushed into the hangar, and the other one over there taken off. So the flight paths are allocated accordingly. So there's a built-in charging service within the. It's a self-charging, self-sustained structure.
Okay, thank you. This might be for you as well. Why not use helicopters where fuel is quick and easy to refill and longer range, for example?
Yeah, helicopters have been around for donkeys years, and they're an elite mode of transport. The idea is this becomes an operational where it's accessible to all rather than just the elite.
Okay. Okay, so George, I'll put this one to you. How you prioritise use cases, is social need. I think we picked up on that earlier on, but is there something you want to expand on that at all?
We look at use cases primarily on social need and what would benefit the citizens of Oxfordshire. Being from 5G or UAVs or connected autonomous vehicles, any knowledge that we get has positive. Any knowledge that we get will also have a positive impact on our citizens.
Yeah, okay. So Gareth, Emily, would you like to pick up on that just based on some of the activities that you've been doing as well?
I was just about to say, yeah, I can probably pick up on that. I think the important in prioritising use cases, there has to be a need and an actual value. It's the reason why for our future flight we targeted Isle of Scilly. It's because existing modes of transport couldn't get out there for a certain amount of days on the year. And in COVID, that's an absolute disaster because, say, for example, government unleashed this scheme that they had to test twice a week to go back into schools. How can a remote island community get the actual kits over there if the existing infrastructure is failing? So that was our use case. And I think it all depends on the time and age you're in. So at the moment, COVID is our use case because that's what bringing something in emergency critical time. Next month, it can be another use case, something to do with schools or emergency services. It's just you've got to see how the public's going to interpret it because, say, for example, if I start flying Dominoes over to my house, there's no actual need for that apart from I really like Dominoes. So that's not going to go down great at all. There's got to be something that values everyone, especially in the whole community.
Yeah, we're so passionate about this stuff. It's like our personal opinion as a company is we don't want projects that are folly. You know, this is taxpayers' money at the end of the day that is funding all this stuff. We all want to get to the end of the project having really found out, how we can help and be hugely proud if we've achieved those milestones. So, and especially in the early stages, the projects that will be accelerated, as Sunil pointed out quite rightly before, were medical ones, but also search and rescue, and those supporting, the essential services that, the public already respect. And if we're coming in and helping those respected services that are either saving lives or protecting us, then the public perception thing is spun around as well. So I think that's crucially important. I would quite like to answer the noise question as well, Michelle, if that's okay.
Well, I was just going to throw that out there to anybody that wants to answer that. So over to you.
You can give it a stab. I'm more than happy to share the stage on this one. But noise is one that gets asked over and over again. And it's one that I actually find quite hilarious, because everyone just assumes that drones are like buzz, buzz, buzz in your face, causing problems. And the same with eVTOLs. The irony is all the vehicles that we work with, and when you explain it to the public and showcase it to the public, they make very different noises. So the Wind Racers rig, big drone carrying 200 kgs of supplies to the Isles of Scilly. It looks like a 1930s aircraft. It's been designed that way because that's how it's easiest to get the safety case, tried and tested airframe. So it looks like an aeroplane, sounds like an aeroplane, smells like an aeroplane, just hasn't got a person in it. So all those lovely like World War II sort of noises that you associate with a Spitfire, that type of thing, the engine sounds very similar to that. The public already know what that sounds like. They're not threatened by it. It's not annoying because it's not a buzzy noise. And then equally, from an actual noise volume perspective, gosh, if we live in urban environments already, how noisy are roads? How noisy are cars? How noisy are buses? How noisy are the oiks that go to the pub and shout at the end of the day? There's a basic level of noise in any streetscape at the moment anyway. And the big question is, if drones are added to that picture, or if eVTOLs are added to that picture, is there a significant difference in noise profile? And how do we present that to the public so they can understand that this intervention might actually be quieter and easier to deal with than things that we've already accepted as the norm?
Really good. Does George or Sunil want to pick up on that as well?
No, I think that's been covered quite well, as in, you know, you have road noise, you have, this is noise that's going to be in the sky. And again, when you start implementing the infrastructure, that noise will be restricted to certain parts. It will be restricted to flight paths, and that's where the flight paths will be determined to have less disruption. So, you know, the flight paths will be determined where it's going to cause that less noise pollution. And that's the piece of work we're doing. Conscious of the time, do you want me to pick the next one up, which is edit?
Yes, if you could pick up the question about how many can fit in the hangar, and then we'll have to draw a close.
What I didn't say and mention, this particular model that we're working on, the design is, I call it a flat pack Ikea airport. It's an airport that actually comes in a container and it's then built on site. But it's a modular airport, so it can have various different sizes, and the hangar, if it will fit one eVTOL, which carries 5 passengers, or smaller drones. It depends on the number of drones or the size of the drone. But it carries one Hyundai largest 5 passenger carrying drone, and the smaller cargo carrying drones can be fitted in there. But if we feel that there is more drones are needed to be fitted into the hangar, and the extension can be added on as a hangar extension as part of that. So that's how we're going to do it. Great.
Okay. A flexible vertiport in some ways.
Ikea airport.
Yeah. Brilliant. You know what, we've got a minute, so we'll wrap things up there. And I just want to thank you all very, very much for a very, very useful discussion there. And I've written lots of notes, so we've got some real nuggets out of that. So it was really helpful. Thank you. And we'll pick some of that stuff up afterwards as well. And just to say thank you to everybody who's joined us for this webinar. And just a reminder that next month we've got a session with a panel of investors. So we're just securing the final selection of the panel, but it's going to be a quite good lineup for a discussion around investment in future flight as well for next month. So please do register for that. And we just want to highlight that we're actually launching a future flight landscape map actually very soon. And if you want to be on the map, and it's quite broad, it's not just about the platforms, because future flight's so broad, it's about the digital and physical infrastructure as well. So there's some key features that we've got thus far. This is something that will evolve and grow over time. We want to be a useful resource for people to find connections, particularly in light of leading up to phase 3 of the competition, but also much broader and beyond the Future Flight programme as well, to sort of showcase, provide a sort of forum, a platform to showcase UK capability on an internationally. drive inward investment. So please do get in touch if you want to be included on that. So that's all from us. Thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you very much to everybody joining us today.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.